question. I was just
Yeah, I was going to
updating.
ask, could you, like, what is it in the question that's been changed that has made it more
Let
confusing?
me send this to Eric, and it's a Word document, Eric, but I added the new questions for the three that were easiest. So hopefully you'll get it. I put on there what Vigo County's question looks like, Lebanon Schools question, and Franklin Township. They're all going to an election here in 21 days. And you're going to see, sometimes we have bulleted versions of it. I didn't have a chance to do that while you were talking. But as you go through it, you can kind of walk through the question once Eric gets it up on the screen there. And you're going to see it's ugly for a couple reasons. One reason is that the General Assembly wants language in the question that says the average property taxes paid to the school corporation per year on a residence will increase by X percentage. And to figure out that calculation, it's pretty tricky. Your financial advisor will do it for you. But in these three examples here, one of them's 55%, one of them's 21%, and one of them's 24%. And that's just, and these are not, some of them aren't particularly big projects in their large districts. So that percentage is very difficult to try to explain to somebody because it's just the school corporation share of your taxes. Okay, go ahead, Eric, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good, you're good. Can you guys see, I've tried to pull up what the form of the question used to look like.
Yes, we can see
and
that.
And then pull up Jane's example that she just sent to me of what it looks like now. Can you see the form of the question until 2021?
Yes.
Okay. So what's in red is how it used to be, and it basically just, this whole slide's how it used to be. What's in red is it's kind of the fill in the blank portions. So it's basically a project description, and it was rate based. So it's a project expected to cost X with a maximum service rate of Y. Now, in contrast, just the length of the question is much, much longer. And again, the part in red is the only part that is permitted to be basically adjusted or described by the school corporation. Everything else is statutorily described. So you've got these percentage increases, references to prior referenda if that is applicable. And so let me stop this and I'll pull up the document that Jane just shared.
And again, those are based off of averages, right? So it may not, that average may not apply to me, or it may apply to me differently than it would apply to you, because it's an average.
And it's actually worse than that because the whole calculation uses the word average. If you think about it mathematically, a median home would make a lot more sense. Because with an average, you could have a few high-end houses, and that pulls up that average, opposed to using median. So that's a great point. That's the first kind of problem with the way the law was written. The second is, it's the school corporation's share of the taxes. So for example, let's say I'm paying $500 a year right now in taxes, but only 100 of it goes to the school corporation. If it says 50% in that formal question, I think I'm going to now pay $1,000 in taxes, not the 500, but it's only the school share that's going to increase by the 50%. So right away, you can see that's just confusing because it's just the school share of the overall tax rate. What is the increase? It also, as you can see here, the third line talks about a residence. And a little farther down, it talks about business. So you have two calculations, one for your average resident and the other is an average business. There's nothing in there about the 2% people, so nothing in there about rental property or farm, for example. So that's one piece of the puzzle that's much more difficult than it was before to pass. And unfortunately, the question starts out with those percentages.
So Jane,
So that's one of...
So our schools then, because when this first came out, we knew about the average and we knew that was going to be very, very confusing. So are schools putting out more information then to try to explain it more? Or are you allowed to do that? Or to explain what this really means?
Yes. Yes, I mean, you can factually try to explain it. The difficulty is you're still raising people's taxes in many cases because this is outside the tax caps, and that's a whole nother conversation. It's very difficult to explain. And when you have anybody who's opposed to you because they just don't want to pay more, even $1 more, this percentage is just easy to throw at it. As I talked to a superintendent today, one of these superintendents, and they said, you know, usually the taxpayers, our community doesn't want to believe the government. All of a sudden now they believe the 55% and 50% in this question. Because if you're opposed to it, it's right in the question. You know, that's just very difficult to explain. Yes, you absolutely can. You can put a calculator on your website, have a place for people to put in, look up their own assessed value or on their own property and see how much their annual bill will increase. But it is hard and it's confusing. And then when you add to it things that are reconfiguration of space or complicated projects, that's a lot to explain at a quick election, I guess is my point. This is the kind of stuff you have to have quite a few meetings with your staff, maybe even put together a group of community members who are well connected so that they can answer this when they're in the barber shop or when they're, you know, at the farm bureau or whatever. So when those questions come up, you have advocates out in the community who can say, no, it's not going to be 50 cents. Here's how much it really will affect you, etc. I don't know if you want to scroll down, that Vigos is there, but the Lebanon and then Franklin Township is there as well. Mm-hmm. And in Lebanon's case, they're actually replacing an existing referendum. So it's coming to an end. They got one approved, 12 years ago. They paid it off quickly. So this actually will not change the tax rate that the people in that community are paying, and yet it still has percentages of 21% in it because of the way it's calculated by the statute.
So in this case, the 11-1 is for, that's kind of an operating referendum example.
Oh, did I grab the wrong one? Oh, I'm sorry. They have a capital one too. I must have, you know, while we were talking, I must have grabbed the one.
Well, then Franklin Township below that, this is another one that is for capital. I think it's helpful to see both examples too. But here's another example of a capital referendum.
There is a lot of conversation out there to see whether it's possible that this question can get modified. partly because there are a lot of schools who need to come back, as Eric was just saying, for operating referendum. And this language makes it very difficult to even win a renewal of an operating referendum. So it's possible that next session we could get some changes to it. It's hard to say. Certainly, if you're ready to go and ready to move forward, you wouldn't wait necessarily for that.